silver went into backwardation. Now, I think you're looking at the main reason that gold rallied and silver had nothing to do with inflation, all this other nonsense they say in those markets. It's geopolitical. Europe going into war, they need war. What do you really look at? You look at gold, because gold is neutral. Central banks have been buying gold. Why? They don't care if it goes up, and they don't care if it goes down. I do think you're going to see the prospects of war increasing next year, and you may see the precious metals still push higher into 27 even.
The modern financial landscape is rapidly destabilizing as deep geopolitical friction replaces basic market mechanics. Investors relying on standard inflation metrics may soon face unprecedented volatility driven by sovereign conflict rather than routine monetary policy. Martin Armstrong, an acclaimed economic forecaster and cycle analyst, warns that the massive surge in physical gold and silver stems directly from escalating European war risks rather than domestic inflation trends. Central banks are strategically shedding U.S. debt and stockpiling gold because neutral assets survive sovereign collapse. Key forecasting models predict that Western powers will likely face an engineered false flag operation early next year, pushing precious metals into an aggressive multi-year rally extending straight into 2027. Furthermore, structural pressure on European monetary unity will eventually force the euro into complete failure, compelling nations to return to independent currencies. From our perspective, holding unencumbered physical tangible assets remains the single most effective shield against sovereign default risk as international debt markets fracture. Now, we present the clips from Martin Armstrong's interview. Before we continue to discuss this, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell icon. Thank you, and enjoy the video.
Now, there's been a real problem with the whole silver-gold ratio issue. Silver went into backwardation. Now, I think you're looking at the main reason that gold rallied and silver had nothing to do with inflation, all this other nonsense they say in those markets. It's geopolitical. You know, when that's what the BRICS was about. All right. Europe going into war, they're most likely going to do some sort of a false flag next year, maybe even in the first quarter. They need war. You don't want to buy their bonds in times of war. Mm-hmm. So then you don't know what currency is going to survive. The euro is not going to survive. You're looking at Europe most likely breaking up, going back to individual currencies, etc. So at that point in time, what do you really look at? You look at gold, because gold is neutral. Central banks have been buying gold. Why? They don't care if it goes up, and they don't care if it goes down. The issue is they've been dumping, U.S. debt. China has been, and European. Because you go into war. If the U.S. goes into war with China, we're not paying that debt. They're not going to get the interest on it. You don't own the debt of your adversary. I mean, that's, economics 101. So they've been moving to gold, which is neutral. You get the gold bugs, they think it's going up. No, they're not traders. They're not like you. Okay? It's basically, you had Blinken threatening them. If you help Russia, we'll do the same to you. Really? That creates BRICS. All right? It's geopolitical. And so I do think you're going to see the prospects of war increasing next year, and you may see the precious metals still push higher into 27 even. But it's a war issue, not inflation. Yes, I mean, look, when the Fed was originally created, it was an absolute brilliant design. It was mimicking what J.P. Morgan did during the panic in 1907. And this is why you have propaganda. Oh, the Fed is owned by private banks. The Jekyll Island books and all this stuff. I mean, the design was that, yes, the Federal Reserve was set up. It was the shareholders were the banks. Why? Because it was to protect the taxpayer. And the Fed was to be a bailout operation for banks. Why do I say the Fed was a brilliant design? Because initially, you take the slogan, lender of last resort. What did that really mean? It meant that you had basically, you have a company. Your local banks are strapped, they're not lending. So your choice is, if you can't borrow, you don't have the cash flow, you got to lay off people. So the idea was you would issue 90-day paper. The Fed would buy it. So that's where the lender of last resort comes from. Now you get that money, you don't have to lay off your people. That's the brilliant design. It was an actual direct stimulus to the economy. World War I comes. The politicians said, oh, we're going to have to issue a lot of debt to cover the war. They told the Fed, buy our debt, not corporate. That set in motion, fine, the Fed's original design of stimulating the domestic economy by buying the corporate debt no longer works. Now it's buying the government debt. It stimulates government spending, not the economy. Then FDR comes into play in 1935. He does the Banking Act. He wants to create socialism. He usurps all the power of the Federal Reserve. He appoints the chairman in Washington. Why do we have all these branches? Because the economy has different regional capital flows. All right, Canada, you got more commodity based on the West Coast versus, the East Coast. So when the Bank of Canada was raising rates to fight real estate speculation in Toronto, they were putting farmers and miners into bankruptcy in Alberta. One size does not fit all. So you can look in a newspaper from like 1927. See, each Federal Reserve branch was independent. So if there was a shortage of rates that, cash there, they'd raise their rates to 4%. Everybody else is at 3% to attract money there. If they had too much, they would lower it to 2% to deflect money from there. All right. So was the brilliant design to actually manage the internal capital flows.
Central banking was originally structured to serve as a targeted liquidity backstop for private corporate enterprise during cash flow squeezes. However, political intervention transformed these institutions into debt financing engines for endless state deficit spending. A widespread economic myth asserts that rising interest rates trigger equity market crashes. In reality, expanding commercial activity naturally elevates borrowing demand, causing stock prices and interest rates to advance together. Conversely, collapsing interest rates historically coincide with severe depressions, where systemic uncertainty destroys borrowing incentive regardless of cheap credit. Central bank attempts to enforce negative interest rate policies consistently fail to stimulate growth when profit expectations are absent. Furthermore, major international corporations are increasingly acquiring foreign sovereign debt as a strategic institutional hedge against domestic governance failures, effectively insulating private capital from vulnerable domestic banking systems. Now, let's get back to the interview.
Look, I think that what our computer has been showing is that we would be going into rising civil unrest and rising international war.
Mm-hmm.
There's a simple correlation, and I've said many times, war does not come when everybody's fat and happy. War comes when the economy turns down.
Mm-hmm.
And people get upset. They start blaming the government. It needs a distraction, etc. And look, what the French did to Germany in World War I, even Keynes, criticized it. It was really retribution because they had to pay, payments to Germany back in 1871. They oppressed the German people so much. There was a revolution in 1918. It was basically a communist revolution, and that created the Weimar Republic. And then money fled the country. And so that's why the people turned to Hitler, promising we're going to restore things, etc. All right. So there's always a consequence to this. And what the computer's been showing, and why I say it's world war, is because it's not confined to one place. You're seeing it in the Middle East. You're seeing it in Europe. You're seeing it in Asia, Thailand, Cambodia, India versus Pakistan. It's like wherever there was, it's all coming to the surface again.
Mm-hmm.
So we handed a half a dozen jets to Greece and made the front pages. What did they say? Oh, now we can do a sneak attack on Turkey, another NATO country.
Mm-hmm.
All right. The hatred between Turkey and the Greeks, go back to Alexander the Great. I mean, so it's wherever there was a grudge, they're not forgotten.
Mm-hmm.
And look, you're seeing it in Canada, West versus East. In the United States, you got, people in California talking about secession. They want to go off to the, Marxist land of never, never, and San Andreas fault really splits and they can become their own island. Great. Stay there, But you're seeing it absolutely everywhere. South America, you name it. This correlates globally to economic decline.
Mm-hmm.
And our computer's been showing that we're in a global recessionary period into 2028. Probably the start of more authoritarianism, because ultimately at the end of this, what 2032 is about, we go through these cycles of basically overthrowing governments, because there's really no single form of government that is ever utopia. All right. The last time we overthrew monarchy and we created republics. Hopefully this time we overthrow republics. They tell us we live in a democracy, but we do not. And hopefully I would like to see after 2032, we get back to, maybe a direct democracy this time. What's happening in Japan, if you look at just the statistics, they're, the second largest holder of U.S. debt.
Mm-hmm.
Let's pick up the rug a little bit. Who owns that debt? It's the corporation and not the government. The corporations are using U.S. debt as the hedge against their own government. The Japanese government can't sell its debt.
Mm-hmm.
It even bragged last year that they bought 97% of their own auction. That's a good thing. All these people that talk about, oh, the stock market's going to crash, interest rates. Sorry. Just look, the Fed raised interest rates from 2016 all the way in and started lowering only with COVID in 2020. All right. Stock market rally, they called it the Trump rally. The stock market rises with higher interest rates and it declines with lower, because as there is a good demand for borrowing, the economy is still expanding, interest rates rise. Look at every depression and recession. What happens? Interest rates collapse. Mm-hmm. People aren't interested in borrowing. The future is uncertain. That's what I warned the ECB about. It went negative in 2014. They think they could punish people to invest. Look, I'll pay 20% if I think the stock market will double next year. I will not pay 1% if I don't think it's going to go up 1%. Mm-hmm. All right. It's a difference between the interest rate is the expectation of future inflation. That's what it's all about. So as it's rising, that correlates to the stock market rising. These people that, I did a book back in 1986, The Greatest Bull Market. We're going to republish it, but I did all the research back then, and the thinking process flipped. Before 29, every time interest rates went up, they cheered. It showed there was still a demand for money. Mm-hmm. All right. Interest rates collapsed from 6% to 1%. Didn't stop the depression. Went down to 32. And there, because of Keynesian and socialism, etc., the thinking process flipped. Oh, the central bank's going to raise interest rates. They want us to spend less. It's what they now want us to do. And that's the problem. So you get all these talking heads. Oh, interest rates go up, the stock market's going to go down. Sorry. Show me a chart where that is correct. Mm-hmm. They don't.
Severe economic contractions serve as the principal catalyst for international conflict, widespread civil unrest, and structural political revolutions. Global powers rarely initiate major military campaigns during eras of widespread domestic prosperity. Instead, governments facing structural economic deterioration frequently weaponize external war as a public distraction from policy failures. Imposing punitive financial penalties on populations routinely triggers capital flight, political instability, and institutional decay. However, these centralized regimes will prove unsustainable, ultimately triggering a major structural shift around 2032, where populations dismantle failing republican models in favor of direct democracy. In our view, navigating this upcoming shift requires prioritizing capital preservation over speculative paper returns. Share your thoughts about this interview in the comment section below. If you found this video helpful, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell icon. Thanks for watching.